Hello everybody, Raven Knight here, and welcome back to our Bible study series going through the book of Esther. I'm very excited to get into today's topic. It's a lot to get through, so let's not waste any time. Let's get right to it. If you have a Bible, go ahead and whip it open. But before you turn to Esther, I know you're going to be tempted. Before you turn to Esther, go ahead and turn to the book of Romans. There's a verse in the book of Romans I want us to take a look at before we start. It is Romans 12:19. So I'll give you a second to get to Romans 12:19 while you're turning there. Thank you guys so much for coming today. If you are brand new to the series, welcome. I am Raven, and I do a Bible study video every single Sunday if I can, because I feel that it is my calling and my duty to share my faith with others, and I love doing these Bible study series. They mean a lot to me, so please enjoy this, and I hope you get something out of it. And if you're interested in seeing more, I have several other Bible study series that I've done, so feel free to take a look at those in the different playlists on my channel. If you are a veteran to these, welcome back, and I hope that you enjoy what we're talking about today. So Romans 12:19, hope you had enough time to get there. It says, "Do not take revenge, my dear friends, but leave room for God's wrath, for it is written, 'It is mine to avenge, I will repay, says the Lord.'" Now, the reason why I wanted to talk about that, you can go ahead and turn to Esther, by the way. The reason why I wanted to talk about that is we live in a day and age where we want justice. We are a very justice-seeking society. We want vengeance for the wrongfully treated. We want righteousness done to those who do well. We want punishment brought down on those who do wrong. When we see a wrong, we get outraged and we want to see evil punished. It's often our first instinct to get upset if someone does something that we see as inappropriate or wrong and they don't get struck down right away. Have you ever glared at someone and just pictured the ways you beat them up to get even, make someone pay? Oh, I have. I have a very active imagination, and there are times where I can just picture the many ways I can get back at someone. There are moments I'm afraid someone will go their whole life never paying for the wrongs they've done, whether to me or to someone else. But today, we're going to talk about a very important aspect of justice. It belongs to God, and all is done according to His timing. You don't need to turn there right now, but in Ecclesiastes 3:17 it says, "I said to myself, God will bring into judgment both the righteous and the wicked, for there will be a time for every activity, a time to judge every deed." I want you to remember this. God has set a time and plan for everything, and that includes His judgment of the righteous and the wicked, and every evil deed. Every single one. Every evil deed will be taken into account. Every good deed will be taken into account. And today we're going to see that as we jump back into Esther. Now we're actually going to take a few steps back into chapter 2. There's a small part in chapter 2 at the end of it that we didn't talk about when we were there last time because I was saving it for today. Go ahead and turn to chapter 2, verse 19. Esther chapter 2, verse 19. It's great, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and read that right now. "When the virgins were assembled a second time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate, but Esther had kept secret her family background and nationality just as Mordecai had told her to do, for she continued to follow Mordecai's instructions as she had done when he was bringing her up. During this time, Mordecai was sitting at the king's gate. Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, became angry and conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. But Mordecai found out about the plot and told Queen Esther, who in turn reported it to the king, giving credit to Mordecai. And when the report was investigated and found to be true, the two officials were impaled on poles. All this was recorded in the book of the Annals in the presence of the king." So to give you kind of a background on what we were just reading, what was that we just read? Why was that important? So this takes place a little while ago. This is right after Esther becomes queen. Like, Esther has just become the queen of Persia. And Mordecai, he's chilling out by the gate. He's hanging out. He's glad that Esther's safe, but he's still, keeping an eye on her. And then he overhears these two guards in front of the city gate going, "Oh, man, that Xerxes, we're miffed with him. What do you say we try to assassinate him? Yeah, let's try to get back at him. How do you think we should do it?" And he overhears them talking, and he goes, "Oh, shoot, I got to let someone know." So he tells Queen Esther. Esther tells the king. The king goes, wait, what? Let's look into this. Investigates and finds out it's true. Kills these guys, and all of this is recorded. All this is recorded. And Esther told him, Mordecai's the one who told me about this. All right, write his name down too. Now keep in mind, Xerxes isn't a very decisive person. I think a good king would have said, bring Mordecai here right now. Let's reward this guy. Let's give him something. But he doesn't. Because King Xerxes, as we know, isn't very decisive. So he probably said, write that name down. We'll do something about it later. We'll do something about it later once I've had time to think on it. Now, me personally, if I had just saved, the president of the United States or something, I'd be a little miffed if he just went, okay, we'll help you out later. I'd be like, dude, but that's what Xerxes says, and what Xerxes says goes, But now we're going to flip back to where we left off. We are on chapter 5. See how far we had to go back? We're on chapter 5, verse 9. Okay, chapter 5, verse 9. You are going to love this. This is one of my favorite parts of the story of Esther. Watch this. Verse 9. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits. Oh, pause there, just to give you a reminder what's going on, because I know that we skipped some stuff. Haman right now has just come away from a banquet with Queen Esther and King Xerxes. Now, he's just been re-invited to another one that night. Like this coming night, he's been invited to another banquet. So he's feeling real good. All right, now watch this. Haman went out that day happy and in high spirits, but when he saw Mordecai at the king's gate and observed that he neither rose nor showed fear in his presence, he was filled with rage against Mordecai. Nevertheless, Haman restrained himself and went home, calling together his friends and Zeresh his wife. Haman boasted to them about his vast wealth, his many sons, and all the ways the king had honored him, and how he had elevated himself above the other nobles and officials. And that's not all, Haman added. I'm the only person Queen Esther invited to accompany the king to the banquet she gave, and she has invited me along with the king tomorrow. But all this gives me no satisfaction, as long as I see that Jew Mordecai sitting at the king's gate. His wife Zeresh and all his friends said to him, have a pole set up reaching to a height of 50 cubits, that's about 75 feet, and ask the king in the morning to have Mordecai impaled on it. Then go with the king to the banquet and enjoy yourself. This suggestion delighted Haman, and he had the pole set up. Okay, we got a lot to unpack. There's so much to look at here. Okay, can you believe this guy? Can you believe Haman? He just got to have a banquet with the king and queen. He's got an invite to the next one. He's the second most powerful man in the kingdom. And in just 1 year, all of the Jews, his hated enemies, are going to be destroyed. He has many sons who are all very well off. He has a lot of wealth, a lot of power, a wife, lots of friends. He's got it all. But Haman takes one look at Mordecai, sees how he's not intimidated by him, and he throws a hissy fit. He runs home, gathers his friends and wife, and tells them how awesome he is. Guys, okay. Before I tell you what happened, I need to give you a picture of how great I am, all right? I'm so awesome. I've got all this money. I've got all this power. I'm the second most powerful man next to the king. I've got a lot of sons, okay? I just got invited to Queen Esther's banquet not only last night, but tomorrow night. I'm doing great, but none of this is good enough while Mordecai's still alive. It's not enough that I have power and prestige. I need to see Mordecai die. Can you believe that? As long as this one irritant lives, he can't be happy. And this is your first warning from this story, guys. Don't let hatred become your identity. Don't let hatred become your identity. Some of you were there for a stream of mine a few nights ago. It was a bad stream, very bad stream. I was getting my ass kicked in various matches, and I was really miserable. In my own defense, I'd just gotten over a bad flu bug, and I was definitely not feeling great, but my behavior was still pretty bad. Worse than my performance. Why was I so upset? I've got a great family, a great community, a successful channel, the chance to work alongside Ubisoft. I've been tremendously blessed, but one bad night of gaming and I'm throwing a fit. I think if we all analyze our behavior, we can think of times where we lose sight of the blessings we have been given. Because we're clued in on minor irritants in our path, usually irritants that will not affect us in the grand scheme of things. Want to know a good example of that? Ever since, I don't like to get political on my channel, but ever since Donald Trump was reelected as president of the United States, I have seen so many live with hate in their hearts. People going online to social media to harass people, hate on people, cry, whine, throw tantrums, a lot of these people very well off. A lot of these people will not be impacted at all by Trump's presidency. They'll never meet the man. He'll never have any real meaningful impact on their lives. But it doesn't matter. They have to throw a fit because he was elected. And I'm not just going to get on them. I'll get on the other side too. There are some people hating on the other side out of pride and joy that they won. Guys, when we let circumstances dictate our behavior and our treatment of others, it can lead to very ugly things. It can lead to very ugly things. Now, why do I bring all this up? Well, what's the point of all this? Why am I making a big deal out of this? Haman had everything. He knew he was blessed, but it just didn't matter because his identity revolved around his own ego and his pride. He has to be the best and respected by everyone, or it's just not enough for him. And I think we all sometimes slip into that mindset. If things aren't going our way 100%, even if there's one hair out of place, one problem we can't fix, one issue we can't resolve, well, it's just not enough then. It is just not enough then. And how petty do you have to be? How petty do you have to be? I have to ask myself that sometimes because I do get petty. I can get very petty. You know, it's not enough that I have 41,000 subscribers. It's not enough that I have a paying job. It's not enough that I have a family that is still together. It's not enough that I have a roof over my head. It's not enough that I have food to eat every day. This isn't enough for me. I'm having a bad night on For Honor, so I'm going to be miserable. Sounds petty, doesn't it? And I've been there. It's something I have to work at. It's something I have to remind myself of. But now, note what his wife says later on in the passage. She says, why wait? Go to the king tomorrow. Go ahead and impale Mordecai. You want justice? Get it now. You want vengeance? Why wait? Why wait a whole year? Kill him now. And Haman is all about that. Haman is like, that's a good idea. Taking a page out of Xerxes' book. That's a good idea. He likes that. Now, you might be wondering, why 75 feet tall? Why build a pole that high? That seems a little excessive. Well, two reasons. One, it'll inflate his ego. But two, you got to understand how impalement works most of the time. How you usually do it is you impale the body while the pole is still on the ground, right? While it's still horizontal on the ground. Then once you're impaled, you lift the pole up with the person on it and then stand it up straight. And they slowly slide down the pole, impaling themselves with their own weight. It's gruesome. It's ugly. But 75 feet is a long time to go down. It would be a long, painful, agonizing death. So basically, by making it 75 feet tall, Haman has ensured it will be a very, very long death. And everyone will see it. So he likes this idea. Now, things are about to get interesting. We are now in Esther chapter 6. We wrapped up chapter 5. I know, we're bouncing around, aren't we? Let's start with verses 1 through 6. All right, y'all ready for this? Watch this. That night, the king could not sleep. So he ordered the book of the Chronicles, the record of his reign, to be brought in and read to him. It was found recorded there that Mordecai had exposed Bigthana and Teresh, two of the king's officers who guarded the doorway, who had conspired to assassinate King Xerxes. What honor and recognition has Mordecai received for this? The king asked. Nothing has been done for him, his attendant answered. The king said, Who is in the court? Now Haman had just entered the outer court of the palace to speak to the king about impaling Mordecai on the pole he had set up for him. His attendants answered, Haman is standing in the court. Bring him in, the king ordered. When Haman entered, the king asked him, What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? What should be done for the man the king delights to honor? Do you catch this? Let's rewind a second. Haman has just entered the king's court with the express intention of saying, Your Majesty, there's a man I want dead. There's a man I want to impale. His name's Mordecai, and I want you to put him on that pole because he's pissed me off. Meanwhile, the king, who's having bad dreams, asks for the Chronicles to be read and finds out, I never rewarded that guy Mordecai. I need to reward him, but I don't know what to do. I'm indecisive like that. Bring me Haman. Haman, buddy, Haman. Okay. What should be done for someone I really want to honor? Oh. And what does it say? Read verse 7. No, the rest of verse 6, I'm sorry. Now Haman thought to himself, who is there that the king would rather honor than me? So instead of asking King Xerxes, who do you mean? He thinks, oh, he wants to honor me more. Do you see what pride does to us? Do you see what pride does to us? My dad used to say something like this. I can't remember the exact phrasing, but he used to say, when you live your whole life pridefully, you don't see anything beyond the scope of your own nose. You don't see anyone else. No one else exists other than you. So when the king says, who should I honor? I want to honor someone. How should I do it? Haman can't possibly think, he means someone else. He thinks, he wants to do me even more honor. Well, I can't blame him. I mean, I'm such an awesome guy. So he says, no, following on this, verse 7, watch this. So he answered the king, for the man the king delights to honor, have them bring a royal robe the king has worn, and a horse the king has ridden, one with a royal crest placed on its head. Then let the robe and horse be entrusted to one of the king's most noble princes. Let them robe the man the king delights to honor, and lead him on the horse through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Go at once, the king commanded Haman. Get the robe and the horse and do just as you have suggested. For Mordecai the Jew who sits at the king's gate, do not neglect anything you have recommended. Oh, such sweet irony. Oh, it's beautiful. Doesn't that taste delicious? You got to think for a second. You have Haman walking in planning how he'll impale Mordecai. Then the king goes, Haman, I really want to honor someone. How would I do it? Suddenly the pride kicks in, like I said, that ego, talking about me well, lays out everything. And the king says, that's such a good idea. That's his favorite line, remember? That's such a good idea, Haman. I knew I could count on you for this. In fact, you do it. You do it. You're the best man for the job. I trust you above so many other people. You will be the one who does all this for Mordecai. Vengeance is sweet, in the words of Severus Snape. Guys, I can't stress enough how beautifully ironic this is. It is all set up, and here's the best part. Haman can't say no. That was a command from the king, remember, and the king can't take back his own orders. Haman can't say, king, hold on a second. No, he's got to do it now. Let's read what happens. Let's go to verse 11. Ready? So Haman got the robe and the horse. He robed Mordecai and led him on horseback through the city streets, proclaiming before him, this is what is done for the man the king delights to honor. Can you imagine how much this chafed Haman? How furious he must have been to walk his most hated enemy through the streets, telling everyone how awesome he is. And want to know the best part? This was all set up by God. Remember those verses we read earlier from Romans and Ecclesiastes? Justice and judgment are all in God's own time. God designed Xerxes to be indecisive so he wouldn't know how to reward Mordecai right away. God made Xerxes have trouble sleeping that night so that he would have the record read to him. God had Haman in the palace at that time so that the king would ask for his advice. None of this was accidental. And don't take my word for it. Read what Haman's wife had to say about this. Let's take a look at verses 12 through 14. Take a look at this. Afterward, Mordecai returned to the king's gate, but Haman rushed home with his head covered in grief and told Zeresh, his wife, and all his friends everything that had happened to him. His advisors and his wife Zeresh said to him, since Mordecai, before whom your downfall has started, is of Jewish origin, you cannot stand against him. You will surely come to ruin. While they were still talking about it with him, the king's eunuchs arrived and hurried Haman away to the banquet Esther had prepared. Interesting. You catch that? So Zeresh, Haman's wife, points out Mordecai is the one who stands in Haman's way and has started his downfall. A Jewish man, one of the people of God. And what does she say? You cannot stand against him. The writing is on the wall for her at least. Guys, There's a popular Bible verse, Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? Romans 8:31. If God is for us, who can be against us? Guys, you're going to go through life and see bad people do horrible things. You're going to want them to get justice. There are going to be times you do good, and you're going to expect to be rewarded, but you don't. And you'll wonder why. You'll say, God, when will judgment come? When will I get my reward? When will they go punished? My advice, stop asking. Mordecai didn't ask. He didn't sit there tapping his foot impatiently for the king to remember what he'd done. And he didn't cry out to the king to get Haman for him or to stop. No. He did what God had called him to do, to be at the gate, to look out for Esther, to live in faith every day, and in God's time, in God's perfect timing, judgment was given. And it's not done yet. It's not done yet. We're going to move on to chapter 7. Chapter 7, verse 1. Here we go. This is where things get spicy. Get a load of this. So the king and Haman went to Queen Esther's banquet. Remember, this was banquet number 2. And as they were drinking wine on the second day, the king again asked, Queen Esther, what is your petition? It will be given to you. What is your request? Even up to half the kingdom, it will be granted. Now remember, this is carrying on from last time. Queen Esther had appeared before the king, and when the king said, what is it you want, dear? What is it you want? I'll give you whatever you ask. She goes, I would like you to come to a banquet and bring Haman. Sure, okay. They go to the banquet, and he goes, come on, honey, you didn't just want me to come to a banquet. What is it you really want? Come on, tell me. Well, come to me to another banquet tomorrow night, and I'll tell you then. All right, sure. So this is the second banquet. She's now going to tell her petition, so the king is eager. He's like, all right, tell me what it is. What can I do to make you happy? How can I please you, my beautiful wife? Say whatever it is. If you want half the kingdom, you got it. You got it, baby. You want a beach house in Maui? I'll buy you the island. How about that? Huh? Come on. Tell me what you want. So she's going to tell him. Verse 3. Then Queen Esther answered, if I have found favor with you, your majesty, and if it pleases you, grant me my life. This is my petition. And spare my people. This is my request. For I and my people have been sold to be destroyed, killed, and annihilated. If we had merely been sold as male and female slaves, I would have kept quiet, because no such distress would justify disturbing the king. I want to take that into consideration. What you just said there. You said, please spare my life and save my people. Because we're going to be destroyed. We're going to be wiped out. If we were just going to be sold into slavery, that would have been one thing. You know, I wouldn't have bothered you with that because your time is so important. But we're not going to be sold into slavery. We're going to be destroyed, and I want you to save us. And then the king is like, what? You and all your... What? So King Xerxes asked Esther, who is he? Who is he? Who's the man who dared to do such a thing to you? Who would do this? And Esther said, an adversary and enemy, this vile Haman. Now, I get this mental image of Haman chewing on a chicken bone or something, and then just his face just what? Then Haman was terrified before the king and queen. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Can you believe this? To be Haman in the room right now. Have you seen a person go pale with fear? This boy's white as a sheet. Oh, man. Oh, man, just the way he must have looked like. The queen's a Jew. Queen Esther's a Jew. Queen Esther's a Jew. He had no idea. Because remember, Mordecai told Esther not to tell anyone who she was. He had no idea that the queen, the most beautiful woman the king had ever seen, the beautiful woman that the king had chosen to marry him, the one who he promised he would give anything to, turns out I was planning to kill her. Oops. But here's how this goes down. So Haman, let's back up to verse 7 real quick. The king got up in a rage, left his wine, and went out into the palace garden. But Haman, realizing that the king had already decided his fate, stayed behind to beg Queen Esther for his life. Just as the king returned from the palace garden in the banquet hall, Haman was falling on the couch where Esther was reclining. To give you a mental image, essentially what this means is that Haman was basically on his hands and knees pleading with Queen Esther. And Esther's kind of just ignoring him, just not saying a thing, not saying a thing, not saying anything. The king walks in, Haman screams a little like, "Ah, the king!" and then stumbles and falls on top of Esther while she's lying there, making it look like he's assaulting her. Oh, that's not a good look. The king exclaimed, "Will he even molest the queen while she is with me in this house?" And as soon as the word left the king's mouth, they covered Haman's face. Then Hibonah, one of the eunuchs attending the king, said, "A pole reaching to a height of 50 cubits stands by Haman's house. He has set it up for Mordecai, who spoke up to help the king." The king said, "Impale him on it." So they impaled Haman on the pole he had set up for Mordecai. And then the king's fury subsided. It's the first time in the book of Esther, and probably the only time King Xerxes made a decision without asking for help. The only time. Y'all notice that? He didn't say, Esther, what do you think I should do with him? Mordecai, what do you think I should do with him? No, he said, "This man, put a bag over his head, put a bag over his head." And his servant says, he just had a pole set up to kill Mordecai, the guy you literally just gave a parade for? Impale him on it. Impale him on his own pole. And so it was done. Can you imagine what King Xerxes must be feeling? On the one hand, he's so happy for Esther. He's so happy for Esther. He wants to make her happy. Then Esther, in tears, pleads, "Please spare my life and the life of my people. Someone's going to kill us." What? Who? Who would do such a thing? Haman. My most trusted advisor. My favorite official is trying to kill. I need a minute. Steps out in the garden to breathe a minute. Haman is like, oh, Esther, I'm so sorry. Like, okay, I thought. Sees Haman on top of her. Like he's probably having a Looney Tunes level meltdown right now. The guy comes in, "Sir, you also should know he planned to kill Mordecai." Holy! Xerxes is ready to blow. And so he goes, "Impale him." Just not even a question. Just get rid of him. Oh, man. See how everything fell into place? Let's recap Esther real fast just to understand this. The king kicks out Vashti as his wife, wants a new wife. Esther is one of the thousands of women across Persia chosen to participate in the pageant. Mordecai tells her to be humble, be true to herself, not to tell anyone that she's a Jew, just to stay faithful. She does, and she wins the king's favor. Out of all the thousands of women, she's the one who won the king's favor for her beauty and her humility. She becomes queen of Persia. Meanwhile, Haman, because of his rage and hatred and pride, decides he wants to kill not only Mordecai, but all the Jews. Mordecai tells Esther about the situation, and Esther, while willing to help, is scared because if she goes to the king uninvited, she could be killed herself. But finally, she builds up her courage, builds up her bravery, and decides to go before him. She approaches the king, asks to go to a banquet with him and Haman. They agree. Haman, meanwhile, is still so mad at Mordecai he can't stand it anymore and wants to have him killed right away. Mordecai is literally 1 day away from dying. The Jews are less than a year away from being genocided. And then at this one banquet, this one moment, God solves all those problems like that. The enemy is destroyed. Mordecai is saved. Esther is saved. All like that. Judgment is the Lord's. Timing is the Lord's. Reward is the Lord's to give. This book, the book of Esther, hasn't mentioned God by name once, and yet you see him all over the text. All over the history. And this event was world-changing. Because next time we're going to wrap up Esther. We got one more day of Esther. And we're going to discuss how Esther saves the Jews from their fate, because there's one last problem we haven't talked about. Remember, the king can't repeal any of his own orders. So even though Esther has killed Haman, Haman's out of the way now, The order that Haman put into place was still signed by the king's ring, so there's no taking that back. So Esther has to come up with a way to save them. And we're going to wrap this series up by seeing how Esther does it. But I really want you to consider a few things about what happened here. There are going to be times in your life where you feel you should be rewarded when you weren't properly rewarded. There are going to be times where you feel like someone gets away with an awful thing when they should have been punished. You're going to feel like things just are not going your way and you don't see a light at the end of the tunnel. And I'm going to remind you from this, and it's something I need to be reminded of too. Don't give in to hateful, agonizing rage. Haman was furious that he couldn't kill Mordecai in his own time. Why do I have to wait a year for Mordecai to die? I can't be happy until he's dead. So I'm just going to take all matters into my own hands. But Mordecai was rewarded in the timing of God's necessity. And the Jews were saved in the timing of God's necessity. Judgment and reward are God's to give in his own timing. And that includes for you. Before you start whining about the injustices of the world and how things aren't going the way you want them, wonder for a moment if perhaps you need to pray to God and thank him for allowing judgment and reward to come in his timing. That's where we'll leave things today. Hope you guys enjoyed, and as always, I will see you in my next video. Take care.